All right, can we see the PowerPoint presentation here, everyone?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So to begin with, and I'll start by saying the presentations that we've gone through before have taken about 35 minutes. We would ask that if you can hold your questions until the end, that would be great, so we can get through the whole presentation, and then we're happy to take questions from everybody, and comments, whatever you'd like to let us know. If for some reason you have a question that can't wait until the end, something that you need clarification on as I'm going through the presentation, you can write it into the chat function. I think Nicole had pointed it out before, but you'll see the button. It looks like a little message button down at the bottom of your screen. You can use that to ask a question, and although I can't see it, somebody else from the town will be able to read it. What else? And then once we get to the end, please, you can use the chat function again to ask your questions. You can also raise your hand, and Nicole will call on you in the order in which the hands are raised. We can go from there. So what is a comprehensive plan? A comprehensive plan is a guiding document that whose intention is to control land use for the benefit of the whole community. And it's a guiding policy document. It's required by New York State town law for any township that adopts zoning. So the town of Smithtown adopted zoning in 1932, had a comprehensive plan at that point. The next plan was done in 1949, the following one after that, 1957. And that is the last time that the town has completed a comprehensive plan. So the existing plan that we have is over 60 years old. It's outdated. Things like the Long Island Expressway had not come out to the town at that point. Even the parkways hadn't been completely built. So the plan has, it's old. It needed to be updated. We hired H2M consultants to help us with the plan. We have one of the representatives from H2M on here. We also have, so myself, a principal planner from the planning department, Peter Hans, who is the planning director, David Barnes, who is the environmental protection director, and Matt Collado, who's a planner in our planning department. We also have Nicole Gargiulo from the supervisor's office, who is very kindly moderating this, this event. So I apologize if there's anyone else from the town that I've missed. That's all that I saw on here when we started the presentation. So the draft plan that was recently presented to the town board includes a number of sections. It includes a land use component, a transportation or circulation section, a community facility study, a sustainability study report, a capital improvement plan, and then 6 community plans, one plan for each of the hamlets. That it summarizes each of the recommendations as they pertain to that particular hamlet. I'd also just like to point out, there's been questions in some of the past presentations. People thought that the recommendations that were made in the plan were 100% going to happen and would happen in the next couple of years. That's not really the case. The recommendations are guiding, they're guiding policy recommendations. There are some capital improvement projects as well. However, a lot of what you see are recommendations for zoning. And the idea is that these recommendations and projects would be implemented over the time frame of the plan, which is really on the order of 20 or so years. So some things can be implemented in the short term, others are going to be much longer term. Here's some information, just general information about the community of Smithtown. This is the smaller hamlet of Smithtown. On the left-hand side, you'll see we call Smithtown at a glance. It's demographic information about the hamlet. percentage of people that own homes versus rent. So in Smithtown, we have about 88% of the population lives in owner occupied housing, about 12% rents. Similar to the rest of the township, the household income is high, considerably higher than what the average median income is in the county, and more so in the state, of course. On the right-hand side, you'll see the land use breakdown. Smithtown, the community of Smithtown has a pretty large percentage of open space, larger than most of the other hamlets. You'll see we have about 22% of the community is open space. And that's largely because of Caleb Smith State Park, a portion of Blydenburg Park, and then the greenbelt along the river. When we began this process back in 2019, beginning of 2019, the first thing that the town did was conduct a public outreach campaign. So we started in the winter of 2019, going through the spring of 2019. We had a multimedia approach to try and get information out and to try and get public input. There were announcements that were made at each of the town board meetings and Board of Zoning Appeals, Planning Board, and so forth. We had articles in Newsday. You'll see one of these articles is on the screen. Smithtown News, Times of Smithtown, the online news sites throughout the town. We had information on the town website. We had social media posts. We put flyers in the downtown, so they were in most of the downtown businesses. We also distributed the flyers for public outreach to the schools. Most of the school districts sent home they either sent home the paper flyer with each of the students, or emailed home the digital flyers with the daily news updates and so forth for the school. We also reached out to all of the community organizations to try and get them to reach out to their membership and get input. So the result of that public outreach, we had an online questionnaire that we had available. We also had 6 public workshops that we conducted during that spring. We received about 1,200 responses to the questionnaire. You see the blue dots on the screen represent the people, the locations where these questionnaires were filled out. We had about 370 people attend the 6 workshops. For Smithtown in particular, so Smithtown was the first public meeting that we held. We had it at the Senior Citizen Center. We had about 75 people that attended the workshop. We also had about 200 people that identified themselves as Smithtown residents who completed the questionnaire. I'm going to go into the next couple of slides are, I don't know if my cursor is moving around here. I'm trying to move my screen. The next couple of slides go into the comments that were received at the public workshop and the online questionnaire. So what people spoke about at the public workshop. Number one was downtown Smithtown, and things brought up about downtown Smithtown. Number one was for the New York Avenue School, the desire to see some kind of a community center, recreation center, and preserving the open space there. Improving walkability along Main Street, pedestrian improvements. Need for small, affordable units for seniors and for young adults within the town, and to improve the general streetscape in downtown Smithtown. For transportation, comments focused on-street parking, safety concerns, people that the shoulders where you can park are too narrow, so when people are opening their doors, you have the oncoming traffic. Traffic and speeding throughout the entire town, largely those comments focused on Main Street. Also, again, improving pedestrian safety. With respect to community facilities, there were some comments that fences that separate the town, county, and the state parks should be removed generally to try to improve access to the parks, to the beaches and trails, the Greenbelt Trail in particular. Also to update the historic sites inventory. The last time the town completed the historic sites inventory was 1980. So there are quite a number of updates that need to be made to that, and also to add more buildings to the national and the state registers. In terms of environment, the large focus, at least at the workshop went, was for sewers. The next couple of slides go into the responses that we had from the online questionnaire. So the first few are townwide survey responses. So the 1,200 people that had replied on the questionnaire, these were those results. It's not specific to the smaller community of Smithtown, but the town of Smithtown at large. So the top 5 reasons why people decided to live in Smithtown. Number 1 was the quality of schools. Number 2, quality of life. 3 was found a home that they liked. 4, close to family and friends. And 5th was the character of the community. So these items, as well as the items that you see on the right-hand side, are all the major points that the town has taken into consideration in drafting this plan. That they are the reason why you live here. And they are also the concerns that you have. And so, the hope is to be able to address that with this plan and moving forward. So the right-hand side, issues of concern for property taxes. Obviously, the property taxes here, as well as the rest of Suffolk County and Long Island, are very high. The next 3 are all very close together. Condition of parks and recreational facilities, access to parks and recreational facilities, and environmental quality and protection. Following that were 2 traffic-related concerns, traffic in general, and then bicycle and pedestrian safety. Going on with the townwide survey responses, comments that we received pertaining to land use and transportation, largely to keep the single-family residential neighborhoods untouched, which I think you'll see come through with the plan. Second, to encourage restaurants and retail, agriculture, commercial recreation, offices and institutional uses in the commercial areas of the town, to discourage industrial uses generally, to improve biking and walking conditions, and to improve transit and rail access. With respect to sustainability, there were many comments about trying to make the town more green. So wanting to plant more trees, provide local incentives for businesses to go green, generally providing the framework for improving sustainability in the town. For parks and open space, the largest driver that we saw, the largest thing that people wanted was access to walking and hiking trails. Second was natural areas and nature parks. So generally people were looking for ways to both passively and actively recreate. Paved bike trails, neighborhood playgrounds, canoe and kayak launches were all things. These were the top of the list of what people are looking for. In terms of the smaller community of Smithtown, so this is that smaller group, approximately the 200 respondents within the hamlet or the community of Smithtown. We asked people, what do you do in the town? What are the things that you use Smithtown businesses for? So 93% of people said they eat in Smithtown restaurants. 72% shop in Smithtown stores. And it goes further down the line. But these are all things that we know people use the community for and want to enhance. What do respondents want to see more of? What do residents want more of? Restaurants and bars, entertainment establishments, microbrewery type use, high-end retail stores, cultural facilities. And so these were the top 5. They were actually the same top 5 uses that residents throughout the entire township wanted. So for each community, whenever we've done these presentations, it's been those same 5 uses. The question was asked, how appealing would you find the following types of potential new development in downtown Smithtown? Just to summarize, we saw the strongest support for buildings, 1 to 2 story buildings built close to the sidewalk, which is basically what we have now. There was strong opposition for buildings that were higher than 3 stories. We saw a lot of additional comments beyond this table asking for improved pedestrian access, community and recreation center at the New York Avenue school site, affordable housing for young adults and seniors, and streetscape beautification. So it's good for us to see that the responses that we got from the online questionnaire very closely matched the responses that we received at the workshop. Going further with the questionnaire responses, respondents were asked, where do you feel unsafe, or what safety improvements do you feel need to be made with respect to traffic? Many people had indicated the need for safer pedestrian crossings on Main Street, a need to improve the safety of Route 111, the intersection of 111 and Route 25, as well as to improve traffic flow in that location, and safe biking paths. For parks and open space and historic resources, there were strong desires to preserve the remaining open space and improve accessibility to the existing open space. There's significant open space along the river in Smithtown. However, access is somewhat limited. There were requests to upgrade the Sweetbriar Nature Center, to improve sports facilities and playgrounds, and to generally preserve the historical character of Smithtown. So that's the input, that's the public input that we received over that course of months that we were taking public input. Over the following year, H2M took those comments, met with the town, and began preparing the draft plan. So it took about a year for the plan to be put together. And what will follow in here are the recommendations coming out of that plan. Townwide, the general recommendations were to modernize and simplify the zoning ordinance, to right zone properties. So for properties that had their zone changed over the course of the last 60 years, their use might not match what the zone category is. So the idea is to change the zoning to match what that existing use is. To reduce split zoning so as to reduce confusion when it comes to developing a property. To maintain existing neighborhoods, so not to change the single family character of neighborhoods. To reduce incompatible uses, to revitalize the downtowns through transit-oriented development, through pedestrian improvements, and we'll get into some more of that in a little bit. To expand the uses permitted in the Long Island Innovation Park at Hauppauge, which most people probably know as the Hauppauge Industrial Park, but it was rebranded last year as the Long Island Innovation Park. So the recommendation is to expand the kinds of uses there beyond the traditional industrial uses. To differentiate zoning between to differentiate the zoning categories between West Jericho Turnpike and Middle Country Road. Currently, those two corridors are zoned the same. They're zoned wholesale and service industry. However, the character of them is different, and so we've recommended to modify the zoning there to reflect that different character. As far as townwide transportation recommendations, to enhance pedestrian accessibility, particularly near transit centers and the downtowns and the industrial park. To implement traffic calming where warranted, to fill in gaps in the bicycle network as well as the pedestrian network, to work with New York State DOT and Suffolk County DPW to deploy timed signal progression along their roads, to consider complete street strategies in the commercial and mixed use development areas. That means accounting for more than just motorists, but in locations where you would see pedestrians and bicyclists, to try and design the roadway to accommodate all of those users. To continue to work with New York State DOT Suffolk County DPW and the MTA to reduce congestion and to improve rail service. We know that there are a lot of agencies and authorities here that are involved, and it's going to take cooperation and participation with all in order to make these recommendations work. I put a note down at the bottom here just so that people are aware. We've had some questions from people going through the plan, that the recommendations in the transportation section are somewhat general and will be refined through the environmental impact statement process. We'll go into that in a little bit later, and feel free to ask questions later if anyone has any. The community facilities recommendations townwide. To upgrade the existing facilities, to acquire additional open space where possible. In order to accomplish that, we're recommending that the town consider establishing an open space fund, a dedicated open space fund to acquire land. A recreation and community center, again, you've seen that a few places, and to protect the historic resources throughout the town. There are, now we'll get into the specifics for Smithtown, for the Smithtown community. Actually, I'll just go back one slide so I can let people know that with each of the communities, what we've done is we've gone through the townwide recommendations, and then the next section is the recommendations specific to the community. If you have any questions on recommendations as they pertain to other parts of the community, you know, Kings Park or Comac, Hop-Hog, and so forth, those presentations are available on the website. You can go and look at that. Also, you can feel free to ask the question at the end of the presentation. So in Smithtown, there are two main areas of change. The first is downtown and the Main Street corridor from the river to Route 111. So the recommendations that pertain to this area, some are small, some are larger, but to right, one of them will start at the west, to right zone the Stop and Shop, which is currently zoned neighborhood business. So the recommendation is to change that zoning to the shopping center business to reflect the use that's there now. Again, on the south side of the road, to preserve the vacant land adjacent to Gibbon Park. If people can see here, it's currently zoned for townhouse development. So the recommendation is to preserve this through one of a number of different mechanisms, either fee simple acquisition, a transfer of development rights to the New York Avenue School over here, or cluster development whereby the west side of the property could be preserved and development moved towards the east side. Again, as these are, this is a plan with recommendations. The town does not own these properties, so the policies that the town adopts are what's used to help implement it, and that's why there's a number of different mechanisms that we've listed. Moving on from there, recommendation is to change the zoning from Edgewood to the railroad. This area is currently zoned central business, which is your typical downtown business zoning. So the recommendation is to change this zoning from central business to neighborhood business. There's minor changes with respect to that, but basically it differentiates the area from the traditional downtown center. With regard to the downtown center, where am I here? To replace the central business zone, so everything here is currently zoned central business, CB, to replace the central business zone with a Smithtown Transit Village zone. Currently, the three major downtowns in the township of Smithtown, Kings Park, Smithtown, and St. James, are all zoned CB, central business, as well as a few scattered parcels throughout the town. In order to differentiate the downtowns, because they really do have a different character, we've recommended a different downtown zoning for each of the downtowns. So for Smithtown, we're recommending this Transit Village zoning. And the next slide, we'll get into some of the details about that. The other recommendation here is to rezone the bowling alley and gym, which are currently, so that's where my cursor is now, they're currently zoned light industry. They're adjacent to the railroad. The recommendation is to rezone that area as part of the transit village. Going into the specifics for the core of the downtown, the zoning would be split into 3 subdistricts: a core district, a transit-oriented development district, and a transition district. The transition district would be at the outskirts of the downtown, adjacent to the existing residential neighborhood. So this is to create that transition, hence the name, from your traditional commercial development to your residential. The purpose of these recommendations was to rehabilitate and redevelop the existing buildings and preserve the historic character. We are looking to right zones. There's 2 locations here. You'll see in the light blue on Landing Avenue and Lawrence that are currently zoned central business, and the plan recommends changing that zoning to professional business to reflect, again, the existing uses that are there. So the uses that are there are more, I won't call them residential, but they have more of a residential feel. They're smaller offices, and the recommendation is to keep that as a professional business area that provides a nice transition again to the residences. There's also a recommendation to rezone the corner here where the First Presbyterian Church is. That also is currently zoned CB, central business, and the recommendation is to change that zoning to the residential zoning that matches what's to the north of it. Purpose of that being to discourage commercial redevelopment if and when the church decided that they needed to close or to sell. We would not want that building being torn down. So one of the mechanisms for trying to keep it was to change that zoning to residential. The other area that you'll see here is the New York Avenue School property, and the recommendation for that is to use for municipal and community purposes as well as apartments. For the transit village zoning, this table here gives you a breakdown of what the requirements are for the existing central business zone and how they would be modified for the transit-oriented development subdistrict, the core subdistrict, and the transition subdistrict. So the core subdistrict, which I will go back just to point out here, the core subdistrict is anything that you see in this maroon color that does not have hatching associated with it. So for that core district, it would allow an increase in height from the existing 2.5-story maximum to a 3-story maximum. So it would allow an increase of a 1/2 story. It would establish a maximum front yard setback, which would require that buildings be built closer to the street. Currently, there is a minimum setback, so buildings could go as far back as 50 feet or more. But to create that standard downtown wall that people are looking for, we recommended implementing a front yard maximum setback. The zoning would also allow for a reduction in the rear yard setback from what's currently 50 feet to 10 feet, except however, in areas adjacent to residential zones, that 50-foot setback would remain untouched. The zone would continue to allow commercial uses with apartments on the upper levels, which is currently permitted now. In the transit-oriented development area, this is the area that's directly adjacent to the railroad. You can see, for those of you who know where the planning department is, we're right here, so we're in this area. The transit-oriented development area would allow increased height along the railroad. It would require that development have at least 1 acre. Right now, the minimum is only 1/10 of an acre, so it would require development to have 1 acre. That would allow for larger development. It would also continue to allow commercial uses with apartments on the upper levels. Then the transition areas, which I had pointed out before at the outskirts of the town, would allow 2.5-story height maximum and would allow townhouses and garden apartments. So the thoughts there are really to keep it residential. It would be, it's a denser residential than the single family neighborhoods that adjoin it, but it's a nice buffer from those single family neighborhoods to the denser commercial district. This here is a concept plan just to give people a flavor of the kinds of things that we are looking for and what the town and the consultant envision as a possibility. One thought is the idea to realign Redwood Lane, which currently, if you can see my cursor, Redwood currently goes across to Landing Avenue here. So to realign Redwood Lane and connect it to Manor Road would create an ability to have some additional development in the area that's currently the parking lot or part of the parking lot for the railroad. We're also recommending encouraging shared parking on both the north and the south sides of Main Street, which greatly reduces curb cuts, provides a lot of parking efficiency. So in locations where we have a lack of parking, most of the downtown, this can be quite helpful. And also to create a pedestrian only street that would encourage pedestrian shopping, outdoor dining, community events. People see this, I don't know, some people get excited, some people get nervous. I just want to reiterate that this is a plan that, that will be implemented over the course of 20 to 30 years. And many of the things that you see on here are not items that can be implemented very quickly. It's more of a vision of how things could be developed in the long run. Now, in order to do most of that, the downtown would need sewers. So there's a lot of people on the call that I know are interested in what the status of sewers is. A few years ago, New York State awarded Suffolk County $40 million to sewer downtown Kings Park and downtown Smithtown. Kings Park was a little bit easier to start for the county due to the fact that they had some design work already completed and how close they are to the existing sewage treatment plant. So the Kings Park project they're aiming at least to start construction on installing sewers in Kings Park in 2021, so later this year. For downtown Smithtown, we are not that far, we're not as far along, I should say, as Kings Park. However, we've made significant progress. In 2019, largely with the push from Tim Small, who's the president of the Smithtown United Civic Association, and I know I saw Tim on here, so thank you, Tim. The town and the Civic and the Chamber of Commerce formed a working group with Suffolk County. I believe it goes back to 2019. And through that working group, we've been meeting probably about every other month to examine how to move forward with sewers in downtown Smithtown. So the first item that the working group had discussed was whether it was more viable to build a new sewage treatment plant for Smithtown or to connect to the Kings Park sewage treatment plant. Just based on financials, it makes significantly more sense to connect to the Kings Park plant. It's at least twice as expensive, if not more, to locate a new plant specifically for Smithtown. So in the first stages, we've moved forward with trying to expand the Kings Park plant and evaluate locations for recharge. So as part of the expansion for Kings Park, they would need an area to recharge the sewage effluent, the treated effluent. We evaluated approximately a half a dozen or more sites in somewhat significant detail. The site that has the most promise at this point is an out parcel of the former Kings Park Psychiatric Center. So it's a part that had been part of Kings Park Psychiatric Center, but is not part of Nisqually River State Park. We've had preliminary conversations with New York State to use this parcel, and got the go-ahead earlier. Well, we got the go-ahead, I guess, back in December, but Suffolk County was able to conduct some test borings on that site in order to determine feasibility. So they started doing the test borings at the end of January. We know about 2/3 of the way done with that. And so we are waiting with bated breath to find out what the findings of those borings are, to see if the site is a feasible site. Once we get that information from the county, then we will know much better as to what the next steps are. If it is a viable site, then the county will be able to start preparing or updating the design plans, and at that point can give us a time frame as to when we could see it moving forward. The other area of town where there are some recommended changes, and these are more minor than the downtown, is West Jericho Turnpike. As I had mentioned earlier, West Jericho Turnpike and Middle Country Road have the same zoning right now, which is WSI, Wholesale and Service Industry. So the plan recommends differentiating them, creating a WSI 1 and a WSI 2 district. The WSI 1 district would be on the west side of town, and it would allow things like food retail, which are delis, pizza places, bagel shops, that sort of a thing. Would not allow restaurants. Restaurants would be permitted in the neighborhood business zone. So you'll see that here. Existing uses that would become non-conforming would be grandfathered in. The plan also recommends analyzing regulations for outdoor storage, landscaping, and buffers to residence districts in order to improve the appearance of the corridor, so the general appearance of the corridor. There's also recommendation to right zone the existing shopping centers as neighborhood business. So there's a few here, over here as well. And by changing them to the neighborhood business, it would allow them to continue and to expand or improve. Also, the last recommendation on this part of the town is to expand the multifamily zone that's adjacent to the new apartments. So people that have been on the west side of Jericho Turnpike, the new apartments that have been built there, and the assisted living facility across the street. Recommendation from the plan is to expand that multifamily zoning district to allow for some new apartments over in this area adjacent to the existing. Additional recommendations to work with the MTA in order to improve Long Island Railroad service and make improvements at the Smithtown train station, to expand and upgrade Brady Park, to swap parkland with Suffolk County to acquire and expand Given Park. So currently Given Park is a county park. The town is in talks with Suffolk County to swap town land that's adjacent to Blydenburg with the county, and the county to give the town Given Park. So it would allow us to expand our existing resource there. There's also, for those who have been aware, the town has efforts to acquire the Oasis Club on the other side of the river. So the thoughts there are to be able to really make this a nice gateway into the town. Other recommendation that came through is to expand the bicycle infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure throughout the town and in the transit centers. So the next steps, as I had said, the first year, 2019, we spent a lot of time getting public input. 2020, the time was spent drafting the plan. The draft plan was presented to the town board at the same time that it was presented to the public in December of 2020. And from that point through February of this year, we're doing the presentations of the draft plan, and the plan is open for public review and comment. We plan on scheduling a public hearing at the end of February, beginning of March. That has yet to be determined yet. No date has been set. It will be publicized. Anybody that's been participating in these workshops will get notified of it. We will also have the information on the town website. So once that gets scheduled, people will learn. I'm going to turn it over to David because I also want to talk about the SECRA scoping process and the remainder of the SECRA process, the State Environmental Quality Review. David, would you like to join in?
Sure. Thank you, Allison. Good evening, everyone. David Barnes, I'm the Director of Environmental Protection. So Allison has been talking about the plan and the policies of the plan, and the other part of this is the generic environmental impact statement. So when the town board on December the 15th released the draft plan, they also started the formal steps of the environmental review, the SEQA review process. So they adopted a resolution to require a generic environmental impact statement, or often referred to as a positive declaration. So that was the formal part. And they also released a draft scope, an outline of all the topics to be studied in the EIS. So we received a lot of comments on the scope, and we're currently working with the consultant to address those and modify the scope as needed, so we make sure that we review all the possible impacts and issues that can come out of this. So the purpose of the generic environmental impact statement is to see what the impacts of all of these policies are. So the plan is sort of broad and has concepts, and then the generic environmental impact statement is really going to analyze that and try to quantify how it would change and what, like, sort of quantify how many apartments or how many square feet of buildings, how much traffic would that create, and then what impacts would those have, you know, positive, negative, and how can they be modified. So once we get the feedback on this plan and we know exactly what the draft plan is, then we'll really dive into this analysis and of all of those things. Once we get that kind of under a pretty good handle on it, we'll bring the draft generic environmental impact statement to the town board, and we'll set a formal public comment period. That'll be at least a month of public comment on it, and we'll get all the comments, and then they'll have to be addressed into the final environmental impact statement. The final environmental impact statement is addressing all of those questions, figuring out if anything needs more analysis, and creating that document. Out of all of those steps will come the final plan and what's called the finding statement. So the finding statement is essentially the results of all of our analysis and a recommendation to the town board for the plan and any outgrowths of the plan. So that's kind of an overview of the process we're going to go through.
Thank you. So for those of you that are on the meeting, if you'd like to take a screenshot of this, you can share it with anybody else that you think might be interested. But these are the different ways that we're asking for public comment and for participation. So you've done number one, which is to attend a virtual meeting. So this is also going to be able to be viewed on Smithtown GTV. There's also the links on the town website. So for anybody that was unable to join tonight, you can, they can click on the link and watch the presentation. You can submit, so you can provide comments tonight. This is going to be the last slide, so we're going to open it up to comments and questions in about a minute. The second thing that people can do if you don't feel like speaking or if you're not on tonight's call, you can submit written comments to the planning department. Our email address is listed here at smithtownplanning@smithtownny.gov. All comments that we've received, we're collecting all comments, and we are providing our consultant with copies of all the comments as well. If you don't want to do that, or if you do want to do that, but you want to do more as well, you can attend the town board public hearing for the draft. As I had mentioned a minute ago, the date has yet to be determined. We anticipate that it will likely be the end of February or beginning of March. As David had said, once the public hearing is closed for the draft plan, the consultant will then be working on the draft generic environmental impact statement. Once that is accepted, and we anticipate that that would be complete in the spring of 2021, there will be a public comment period on that. I think David said at least a month for that public comment period. Once that comment period is closed, then we would take the comments received and make all necessary changes, incorporate the comments as necessary into a final generic environmental impact statement and a final comprehensive plan. So all the comments that are received now through the public hearing and through the environmental impact review will all be incorporated into a final comprehensive plan, which we hope and anticipate can be presented at the, probably looking at summer of 2021. With that, I'm going to end my screen share and open it up. Nicole, do you have the people that have their hands raised?
I do. Before I call on Tim Small, who's got his hand up first, I just want to remind everybody, if you'd like to use the raise hand button, if you have questions or comments, the raise hand button is on your lower right hand side. It looks like a smiley face with a plus sign on it. If you push that button, you'll see raise hand right there. Just push that button again, and then your hand will go up. If you're on a phone, just hit *9. And again, to mute and unmute on phones, the function is *6. So with that, Tim, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Sure. Actually, Nicole, I'm going to jump in 1 second. Sorry. And then hand it over to Tim. If there's anybody that that prefers to write instead of to speak, feel free to use the chat function to write your question, and we will read that question out loud and answer it. Go ahead. Sorry, Tim.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Nicole. And first, Allyson, Peter, David, and the rest of the team, I mean, hats off to you. I think this is a very, very nice piece of work. I see some real jewels of excellence here. And I'm especially pleased to see that you've looked to incorporate some of the concepts that the Smithtown United team has been advocating for, and you know, whether it's the pedestrian street, the community center, consolidation of some office space, and I could go on. But first off, some very, very nice work, and I'm encouraged to see what I've been able to read. But that being said, I do have a few comments. First, surrounds this TDR and the transfer of these development rights. I don't completely subscribe to what's being advocated. And I'm specifically focused on that New York Avenue property. And in the plan, and it's on page 192, item number 6, you know, higher density residential such as townhomes or multifamily apartment development. So what's being advocated here is an apartment development on this site. There are some words that say a smaller scale than what's being advocated for on the south side of the railroad along Redwood Avenue. But that, this is like a lightning rod. No secret, huge community pushback a bit ago when this was first proposed. I would suspect that there'd be nothing less than at least that kind of pushback if indeed this were to move forward. I got to remind everybody that this was initially a school. Schools are typically in residential communities. And I think it'd be appropriate for any kind of development that should be done in a manner that's compatible with the pattern of the surrounding community. And clearly, apartments are not consistent with the surrounding community. So I would expect a tremendous amount of pushback on that kind of development. And I'd remind you that one of the principles, and I think you highlighted it earlier, and thank you for that, was to acquire additional open space. That is the last remaining green space in the downtown, I'm going to call it the business district, and it would be, I think, criminal to lose that. So I'd encourage the team to revisit that, and hopefully we could get to a better place there. I'm not an expert on TDR and the Breslin versus New York Avenue. The Breslin property, some steep slopes. I just don't see how that could be developed by virtue of the fact that it's been for sale forever. It's probably the best testimony that it would be a tough development. So I'd encourage even the county to acquire that property and leave it as green space. So very loud and clear, any kind of apartment development on the New York Avenue property is going to be, I think, problematic from a community standpoint. So that would be number one. Second comment I'm going to pass on is really around the TOD. And what's being proposed is 45-foot, 4.5-story development along Redwood Avenue. And I am not against the transit-oriented development. You've heard me speak to this. I think there's a need for it. I think your targeted location along the railroad is indeed proper. My objection really surrounds the height. I mean, can someone answer me, why does it need to be 45 feet? Why can't it be 30 feet or 35 feet? I mean, why 45? Because that's what developers look for, right? Acquire the property, it's cheaper the taller you go. So I'd ask that particular aspect of this be revisited. My last comment, and this is going to sound critical, and I don't mean it to be, but I'm going to kind of say it just the way I think of it. And it really concerns the concern for pedestrian traffic along Main Street. And I tell it candidly, and I'm going to apologize in advance because I was underwhelmed with the concern for pedestrian traffic along Main Street. I mean, there's been a number of fatalities along there. I wasn't exactly sure because some of it might fall into the Village of the Branch. But just to talk about, crosswalks and things, I thought was a bit underwhelming for the significance of the category when we talk about pedestrian safety. And I'd look for the plan to include a lot more of what I'd characterize as traffic calming measures. Whether that means, stop when you see a pedestrian crossing the street. I know it's a major thoroughfare there, but I give you the best example of like Sayville. You know, Sayville, downtown Sayville is 27A or Montauk Highway there. You cross the road there and everybody's got to stop. You know, I think if we can encourage more traffic to the bypass rather than going through Smithtown, you know, that's what we have to accomplish. But generally speaking, underwhelmed from a pedestrian crossing aspect for the Main Street area. So those are my three primary comments, but I did lead off with, I think it's a really good piece of work. A lot of jewels in there. Let's polish up the diamond here. I think we can advance, you know, Smithtown, and I'm encouraged by some of the work that I've seen. But I really felt compelled to pass on some of those comments. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Okay, I have just real quick before anybody, I'm going to call on Dave Woolmitz next, but I've been in direct contact with the school, Smithtown Central School District, regarding the New York Avenue property, and it should be kind of just to to make sure no one gets nervous about it. The school has no interest in selling the New York Avenue property. I believe they've since taken it off the market. And they're not looking to make any major changes right now. So that's kind of where they are with the New York Avenue building. Just a little piece of information that, you know, everybody should. I remember way back when there was talk of selling the property, but they are happy with the administration offices being in there and have no plans in the future to do anything with that property.
So Nicole, just
Yeah.
since you brought it up, but just let me jump on that a little
Sure.
bit. The fact that they're not interested doesn't mean that it's right.
Right.
That's a large building. It's 79,000 square feet. I don't think we have 79,000 square feet of administrative functions within the Smithtown School District. I think there's a great opportunity here to look at that building, and even if it means cohabitating the building with some town functions and school functions and some community center. I think it's an historic building. I think a lot of the text that's in the master plan is spot on. So I'd encourage all of us to continue to look at that facility and how as a community to best utilize that facility. The fact that they're not talking doesn't mean that it's right.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I'll definitely relay it as well. Thank you for that, Tim.
And if there's a way that we could help facilitate some of that, I'd be glad to step in.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, Dave, I apologize if I say your name wrong. Woolmitz, did I pronounce that right?
Well, perfectly.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's good to see you again. Allyson, Nicole, Dave, great work. I really appreciate, as a Smithtown resident, Hauppauge, where me and my family live, and I'm active in community, and I'm seeing some really great work that's going to push Smithtown in the forefront of Long Island, as it should be, because we all know Smithtown's the best place to live, and it's only going to get better. So with that, love the plan. I had some thoughts that I wanted to share with you all to consider as suggestions. One of which is recognizing the depreciation down by, on average, about 18% to school district enrollments, and the fact that we really need to pick that up and attract enrollments within a younger demographic base of of families. And I think you touch on that in the plan. I think maybe we could focus a little bit more from a sustaining perspective to attract and focus in on how is the master plan going to develop enrollment across Smithtown's hamlets and districts, and encourage that. I think that leads you into the technology focus, which I think you're going to develop very strongly with the HIA portion of the plan and attract that type of demographic. But one of the things that I see blaringly, obviously, that's missing from the plan, and maybe there's a reason, is things that make sense to that demographic is clean energy. And I would love to see in the master plan, which affects the economic impact to the Smithtown, some sort of clean energy policy. How is the master plan accounting for a clean energy focus, whether it's wind or solar, be consistent with where the nation's going now in the direction, quite frankly, on clean energy, but also where Smithtown can lead the island with a clean energy as part of the master plan. And I think that we'll see a significant benefit as a community if we do focus in on that. I don't know if there's a separate plan for that, but I see value in including it in a master plan. That's my suggestion.
Thank you.
Other than that,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I was
other
going
than
to.
that, open space, love it. We're going to do some great things.
So in answer to your question about clean energy, there is a sustainability section of the plan that that highlights quite a few policies that the town should adopt and implement with respect to not just green energy, but energy conservation, water quality, water conservation, air quality improvements, and policies that the town can adopt to further its involvement in the clean energy, the Climate Smart Communities program. So New York State has a Climate Smart Communities program, and the recommendations from the plan align with that. So there is a sustainability section. If you haven't seen it, it's in there. Take a look. If you have seen it and don't think that it addresses your concerns, please send us the specific recommendations that you think should be addressed.
Thank you, Allyson.
Thanks.
And Dave, I can talk a little bit about the school concerns. I was on the housing committee for the Smithtown School District several years ago, and my kids were a product of some of the issues there when they went to Wisconsin Elementary, and they were basically shut out of there and forced to go to a different school. It's one of the things that this school district, Smithtown especially, has had to deal with constantly for 30, 40 years. There's always this cyclical motion where they're needing to expand schools, then they're closing schools. And right now, yeah, I mean, the trajectory is that the school-age population continues to fall. However, when we started this process 2 years ago, who knew that we would have this pandemic? And I think even the school districts right now are trying to think about, like, oh, what do we do? Maybe we shouldn't sell these things, because when we were talking about going to half-size classes and everybody was like, oh man, we got to reopen some of the schools up. So I think that's part of the push of why they're not really interested in selling off New York Avenue right now, and they're holding on to assets that they currently have. So,
yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so I'm going to call on, and I apologize, I have JDH iPad. I don't know your name, so I apologize. If you can just introduce yourself. I want, whenever you're ready, just hit the unmute button. Probably your.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, how you doing? Yeah, this is Jim Havrilla. Yeah, I applaud the vision for the forward thinking on these rezoning evolutions that are happening in towns. I think it's going to be a great move. And perhaps I maybe missed it in the beginning. I had some trouble logging on, but my question is, will the zoning districts be regulated by like a form-based code criteria or review from form-based code architect to help regulate and make sure there's a beautification or a consistency of the beautification of how the facades and the street levels read?
Yes, that's a good question. We've been working with VHB, who I actually see Lou on the call now, for Kings Park. Kings Park has a separate master plan for the downtown that the town had started undertaking a number of years ago, and as part of that, we have recommended design guidelines that are part of the plan. We would be recommending to create design guidelines for downtown Smithtown as well, which would fall closer in line with, as you're discussing, more of a form-based code than the traditional Euclidean zoning. But yes, there would be design guidelines established.
Terrific, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and not to jump into, but also that's one of the key things that we're trying to change is currently all three of our downtowns have the same zoning category, which is CB. And what might work for Kings Park right now doesn't really work for St. James. So that's really why we're taking downtown Smithtown and breaking it up into three distinct districts. And also the zoning districts that are proposed for downtown Smithtown are very different than what's proposed for Kings Park as well as St. James. So that is a major issue for us, and it's something that we've put a lot of thought into, and hopefully we feel that we have the numbers right, as well as the setbacks and requirements for these zoning districts.
Okay, we have a great group tonight. I just want to say, so many good ideas. I have Martin Dedling next.
Hi, I'd just like to know, did you consult with any developers in coming up with these items and in an effort to determine the financial feasibility of actually achieving what's represented, and developers or property owners?
Sure. So the town did not do separate outreach to the developers beyond the public outreach that we had conducted. However, the consultants that we have both on the Smithtown Comprehensive Plan, so H2M, as well as VHB, who's working on our Kings Park Master Plan, do work with many different developers as engineers to them. So they've got planning sides of their firms and they have engineering sides of their firms. And so they have communicated with their engineering folks. And so I don't know, we have Paul and we have Lou. So Lou from VHB and Paul from H2M. I think if either one of you want to just give some indication on viability of projects.
Yeah, so I can give a little bit of context. So a lot of times while we didn't reach out to any developers for this master plan, we've done both our engineering departments where they work with developers on different projects and towns throughout the tri-state area, looking at some of the similar transit-oriented development types of uses. And, we also worked with downtowns in other areas too to see what their zoning works and how we get constant feedback between both our engineers and with other towns about sort of what zoning regulations really work to make some of these projects feasible. And so the bulk regulations for downtown Smithtown try to reflect both the feasibility of some of these projects while also taking into account some of the existing conditions as well as the feedback that we got from the community outreach.
Just as a follow-up to that, I work for a developer and have done transit-oriented developments. And I noticed that you show a parking garage structure. I haven't had a chance to review your plans, and you guys have done great work with outreach to the community and taking a very formal planning process seriously. So I appreciate that as a lifelong resident of Smithtown. But one thing I happen to notice in just the slides passing was that the parking structure that you are proposing for the 4-story area of transit-oriented development housing, I've not seen that as a financial possibility in any transit-oriented development that we've been facing. So, I would just suggest, to include property owners and developers in the discussion as to what the town's ultimate goals are, for how it will be fashioned, the height of the buildings, the structure, the street wall, what all those plans are, and to do some sort of review to see if it's even financially feasible, either now and in a long-term prospect. If we have plans, we want them to have legs, is all I'm saying, if we agree on the plans.
Yeah, and I think that's also something like that rendering was just kind of an example that wasn't trying to be there. There wasn't as much in the text of the plan saying like, if there is this development, then there has to be, this parking structure that exists. It was more of as a way to show a potential future, which I think is really what that rendering is, and that, to fund the parking structure, it might also might have to be something where the town works with the developer on what the funding sources would come from for that type of fee. Maybe we've seen in some towns in New Jersey where it's like a public-private partnership that kind of allows for that structure to exist, especially when it's adjacent to a train station where, the town either leases it or pays for part of the construction so that a certain amount of those spots are allocated to the public to be able to use for them to pay. And again, that's not really what's advocated as much as a plan. That's going to be sort of at the town's discretion if that ever came up. But it was more of the rendering was more to show a potential example of what could be possible to happen.
Is that property owned by the railroad right now? The area in the TOD zone?
Yeah, so Paul, this is Martin, this is Pete, Hans. Yeah, and a lot of this too, you talk about the feasibility. A lot of the recommendations are definitely not feasible unless there's a sewer downtown. That's really the main thing right now that's precluding a lot of this development from happening. We've been spending a lot of time, Mr. Small knows, with the county trying to make something work for the downtown Smithtown area. But no, there's a mixture. Some of the properties consideration for transit-oriented development. Some of it is owned by the MTA, portions of the Atterbury parking area. We've got the parking lot on the south side of the railroad tracks that are owned by the town. You've got the former bowling alley that's completely gutted right now and a possibility for redevelopment. So there's a mix that's privately owned. So yeah, it is. I mean, the feasibility definitely has been considered to that degree, but right now, unless there's some sort of sewer treatment facility linked up, it's very difficult to make happen.
Agreed. But once the sewers come, and they will, these other questions are important questions that we should have the ultimate revision to the code contemplate.
Mm-hmm. Well, we believe we've done our best to make a code that anticipates sewering of downtown.
Yeah, you've done a good job so far. Thank you. One other question. Is there, I might have missed it. I joined a little late. Is there any discussion about affordable housing recommendations or anything like that, or no?
The plan does not go into more specific recommendations than the town's existing the workforce housing policy. And I know the town has its own considerations about modifying that policy, but no, the plan, at least to my memory, does not address affordable housing, with
So-
the exception of size of apartments, I should say.
Right.
So, nothing specific to, a certain percentage of housing or apartments should be affordable, but recommends that the apartments, within the downtown be of a small enough size that they can be affordable to.
So I would suggest or recommend that, you consider even, I'm not sure, I know there's some civics on tonight, and I understand that the civics and even my friend Amy is opposed to development of the school site in that residential neighborhood. And I know it's a hot button topic, but is that civic group for or against affordable housing? I'm just wondering.
I don't know. I think we could probably take that question offline.
Right.
Or we can.
But I would recommend considering there is opportunity for affordable home ownership programs as well, if that is something that's supported. I just don't know if the civic organizations in Smithtown support that or are against that.
We work, Kelly Brown does a lot of work with the Affordable Housing Act, right? So any development, like a mixed use development or something like that. But what is it? 10% of the dwellings must be deemed affordable housing. Is that the law, the state law?
Yeah,
Yes.
we basically abide by the Long Island Workforce Housing Act, which requires 10% of the units to be affordable. So when the Country Point development just recently was completed at the corner of 347 and 111, there's 69 units there, 7 of which had to be deemed affordable. So, I mean, that's been basically the rule of thumb with all of the apartment and condominium developments around town.
I guess I'm just wondering what my neighbors want to see for this new zoning, and what they'd like to see for their family members or their needs, to try to keep kids and families, local, and stop the brain drain from Long Island, and to make it, quite honestly, a cohesive community, one that has, different, participants in the community. I guess I'm looking for that sort of feedback from my neighbors as well.
Well, I guess I can ask. Tim
Okay,
is on the call. If you guys can maybe reach out for a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be an ongoing conversation, and I would support seeing some, minimum requirements if somebody's going to, develop or, find a value and increase value in their property, that they serve the community's needs a little more closely.
Allyson, we have a few questions in the chat that maybe
I'm
I could.
looking. I've got.
And also, when it comes to brain drain, that is definitely one that's near and dear to me. I have 2 kids that are in their 20s, and I'm always looking for a way to keep them local. And both of them have been far flung in order to find good jobs in their careers presently. So I'm always looking for a way to bring them back. But we have a couple of questions here on the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one from Corey Getsky about the school site and whether we, and I think Pete addressed this a little bit, whether the schools and COVID was considered in our plan. And I think maybe you can add to this, Allyson, but I think what we were all hoping and praying when this plan was being written that it was a temporary situation, the COVID, and whether our plan addresses like social distancing and new housing and other guidelines related to COVID.
It's a really good question. We when we started drafting the plan, H2M started drafting the plan was towards and fall of 2019. Large parts of it, the community facilities section was actually one of the first sections that that they had completed. And so that was mostly done before COVID hit us really hard, the end of March, April. It's certainly worth revisiting the plan to see if there are aspects of it that should be updated to reflect COVID. I think I personally am still hoping that this is a temporary situation that we will recover from quickly. Although I think that there are aspects of it that will remain important moving forward, particularly having additional space in the schools to make sure that we can provide learning opportunities for everybody, in the circumstances that we come, back to this place again.
Okay, and then we have a couple other questions that I will maybe take. One was about renewable energy, solar panels, electric vehicle chargers, possibly at the Smithtown Library. Yeah, my department, we're very proud, and I just found out we are we are on the New York State website as like the first town, climate smart, and our electric vehicle charging station is pictured on their website. We have now installed a second one, and we have plans to expand those throughout the town. We initially were thinking of doing them at the train stations, the Long Island Railroad train stations, but sort of the amount of time that you need to spend connected to a charger and the amount of time that you leave your vehicle at the train station don't really line up. You need to charge your car for an hour to maybe up to 8 hours, but people go to work for 12 hours. So they don't really align. We are looking at other town facilities, and the libraries may work out really well because people probably stay there, say 1 to 3 hours. Also, like the Nesconset Library has the town park there. So a lot of those facilities, and we are looking at ways to expand the charger network. We currently have a grant from NYSERDA. We're going to be installing solar panels on the Landing Avenue Country Club. Those panels will power the swimming pool pumps and filters and all of that, and some other things. So we're definitely looking to do these with renewable energy, and that is in the sustainability plan, sort of in broad policies. We also have a question about further recycling options. The town has a separate plan called the Local Solid Waste Management Plan. We just updated that and adopted it last year. That is on the town website under the Department of Environment and Waterways. So you can certainly read that, but yes, in there, we are always looking for ways to recycle. Currently, the economics of it are kind of difficult to expand, and that's why we've returned back to dual stream from the single stream, but we do have a local solid waste management plan. And then we also have Hal Terry. We'll give it back to Nicole, but Hal Terry is looking to speak.
Yes, Hal, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, very good. Thank you. In terms of the whole report, I think it was great, all the effort that was put in, both by the town staff and by the consultant. I appreciate that. There is one area, though, that I feel could use more effort, and that is in terms of bicycling safety and comfort. And one thing that kind of confirms to me that it needs more effort is in the report, it says only 8% of the survey respondents said that people feel safe bicycling around the town. And that doesn't surprise me. That's what I've heard from many people in the past that think I'm crazy because I ride around. So it's also not surprising because right now, we don't have any bicycle network. That kind of irked me a little in the report that it says we're going to fill the gaps, but we really don't have a network. What we have is a few random pieces. And in fact, years ago when the state came through with their bike route and they wanted to go from the whole length of Suffolk County, and they ended up getting to Smithtown and found they couldn't get through Smithtown, so they ended up saying, well, we're going to have two bike routes. We'll call one bike route 25 and one bike route 25A, and we'll just have a gap in the middle. And currently also there's a major effort to extend the Empire State Trail out the whole length of Long Island. And recently I've been involved in that a little bit, the preliminary alignment that they're talking about, and they're talking about skirting just south of Smithtown because of the difficulty. And the parks do make it tough and the waterways make it tough, but there's things we can do about that. So what we really need is to start basically from scratch and set up a bicycle network, draw one up, talk to the bike clubs, find out where the safe routes are that experienced cyclists ride. We need to adjust the zoning regulations so that they support it. And we need a complete streets resolution. I know that's mentioned in the report, but that's not the kind of thing that needs a 3-year study to come out with. Babylon, Islip, Brookhaven, 3 of the 4 towns around us have a complete streets resolution. So does Nassau County, so does Suffolk County, so does New York State. So it's a fairly simple matter. So what I'd like to see is a bicycle master plan. And that's a document that lays out what is needed and how to go about making those changes. And I think this is really important for Smithtown for a number of reasons. One is recreation. The people in Smithtown want to be able to ride their bikes for fun and for exercise. And they should be able to, and not have to put the bike on a car and drive to the Bethpage bike path. For transportation, there are many, many trips that could be made by bicycle. And right now, almost everybody does them by car. And every time you let somebody or you set it up so that they can make the trips by bicycle, it means it's one less car on the road tying up and causing more congestion. It also means that it's one less vehicle that could hit me or somebody in my family. Traffic, so equity, there are many families, we're talking about the cost of living in Smithtown, and there are many families that have one car or have two, but then one of the kids is going to college, they need a third car, they can't afford it. If you can make a lot of your local trips by bicycle, then it means that the extra car that they have can be used for somebody that really needs it for a longer distance trip. Then we talked about our TODs, the transit-oriented development. Those things depend on a 3-legged stool, which is mass transit, walking, and bicycling. So right now we don't have the bicycling part. The walking part could use some improvement. So if we want those to succeed, and we don't want to build something and then have people move in and initially think they're not going to need a car and then go out and buy cars and start adding to the congestion, we need a better bicycle system. And also it'll help keep the cost of living down, because in town, anybody that's going to be working in one of the stores, if they don't need a car to get to work, then whoever's employing them doesn't have to pay them as much to keep them happy and satisfied. So my request right now is, could we pass a complete streets resolution by Earth Day coming up in May? That should be very easy to do. And the second thing is, could we add into the report saying that Smithtown is going to commit to developing a bicycle master plan? And so that's what I'm hoping for. Thank you.
Hal, this is Pete. You and I have had some lengthy conversations, over the past couple of years, and I wholeheartedly agree with you on trying to develop as many bike trails as possible. I still have your plan here. You provided me with the old plan from the 80s, and I have it right here on my shelf. I didn't forget about it. I think there are a lot of components that we had discussed. The New York State 347 project, as you know, has been creating a bike trail that runs parallel to the roadway. We were just recently advised that the next phase is ready to begin shortly, to take it from Gibbs Pond Road, where the project basically ended 2 years ago. And that'll extend it past the Smith Haven Mall. I use that trail a lot myself, but not just there and not just for biking. I mean, we want these trails for walking, hiking, for rollerblading, other things as well. You go to the Armory or Toner Park. I mean, that trail is being used every day by people just walking around the site. Allyson can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had proposed even a Bethpage State Park type bike trail that would go from Sunken Meadows State Park down along the parkway, just like the Bethpage bike trail does, and then taking that and possibly linking it with the LIPA right of ways. We have the LIPA right of way that cuts across a lot of the Hop Hog area, and it's basically wires with just a lot of dirt brushy areas below. But we saw that out in Setauket. They were able to do a bike trail through a lot of the LIPA right of ways out there. So, we definitely agree that this can be done. We definitely talk about it in the plan. I don't know that it's probably not to the detail that you want. I think you probably would love to see a map that outlines everywhere that a trail should be installed. But I believe we did try to address it, and probably more can be done, but it is very important to the town, and we've tried to address it.
Yeah, we've also made the recommendation to H2M. We've asked that they, when in revising for the final, that they incorporate the recommendations from the Suffolk County Bike Master Plan that had been completed. I think the county completed it a number of months ago. But we can have a follow-up discussion, Hal, regarding specific recommendations for amending this plan, and then also for recommending that the town do a separate bike master plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will be submitting, I have a lot of comments, but I didn't want to start reading through all of them, so I'll submit them.
All right, thank you. I just want to read a comment from the chat regarding historic preservation in the downtowns and sites that would be eligible for the National Register, and for petitioning for a downtown and Main Street historic district. The question, I just want to make sure that I have everything here. The question is that in the plan? Is it outlined in the plan? The town would be requesting additional sites to be put on the National Register, and that we would be requesting a historic district. The plan does not speak to specific historic sites within the town. It does lay out a number of initiatives that the town is looking to take in order to improve and protect the historic character. One is reconstituting the Historic Advisory Board. The town has actually already just very recently taken the step of reconstituting the Historic Advisory Board. That board would make recommendations pertaining to applications that are received for any sites that have a historic site or that could affect a historic site. So that's one thing that's in the plan that's already been completed, which we're happy about. The plan also recommends updating the historic sites inventory, and I know Corey Geske is on the call here. This was one of Corey's major recommendations and requests, and it's something that we agree absolutely needs to be done. I think once that is complete, then we would like to move forward with additional historic designations. But what we are trying to do is I'll say to beef up the historic protections in the town's code. So I hope that answers to some extent. If not, please feel free to reach out directly. Thanks. Are there any other people?
I do not have anybody with their hand up. I do see a couple people on their phones. So again, if you came in late and you would like to raise your hand to speak, just hit *9 on your phones. And if you want to unmute yourself, hit *6. Again, if anybody else has a question, just use the raise your hand function on your computer. It's at the lower right-hand corner. It looks like a smiley face. Just push that button, and then you got to hit raise your hand button on top of that. So you're essentially pushing 2 buttons. We've got some great feedback so far. Had a really good turnout for Smithtown too. I still don't have anybody with their hands up, but if you think of anything or you talk to a friend or a family member about tonight's meeting, usually takes us about 24 hours to upload the videos to YouTube. I also include a link on the town's draft master plan page, which you can log into smithtownny.gov, and you'll see the Citizen Help Center right on the home page. There's a button that says draft master plan. When you click that, all of the links for each Hamlet's presentation video is there. And you can literally just ask them if they want to watch it and contribute. I'm sorry, I was just reading Amy's very nice comment. So if you have friends and family that want to watch it and then send in their comments or questions, they can do so by emailing smithtownplanning@smithtownny.gov. I will also include the contact email and phone number again for anybody in the chat. Amy just added that she appreciates the value that attention to our historic buildings adds to our community's historic and quality of life and charm. Thank you, Amy. So yeah, I'll ask one more time, going once, going twice, if anybody has a question. Nope, I don't think so. I think we're good.
Yeah, I'll just add, Hal, I found this, see? I didn't forget you.
Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your evenings to join us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a great night, everyone.